Men, why didn't you want to go on a second date? Viewer edition. But also seriously, women and non-binaries too. Get in here. Story 1. In my 20s, I went to the church equivalent of religious classes that didn't count as college. At the time, I couldn't afford college and wasn't about to get loans since I didn't have any scholarships, so I needed something to do with my life, and these classes helped keep me busy and social on the days I didn't work. Anyway, at this building, there was a game room where we could choose to play either ping pong or pool. Not being particularly good, but enjoying knocking the ball around on occasion, about once a week instead of playing volleyball in the gym with my friends, I would play pool by myself in the game room. One day this guy comes in and decides to take a fancy for me because I was always the one he saw in the building playing pool. So we got to talking, and I agreed to go on a date with him, a decision I would later come to regret. We decided to go bowling. So after classes on a Wednesday, we head over to the bowling alley in my town since women get to bowl for 2 games free that night weekly. While waiting in line to get our shoes so he could pay for himself, one of my sisters comes in with several of her friends and starts talking to the guy and me. All is well, I think. We decide the 5 of us will join up as one big group, and the guy surprisingly decides to pay for all of us to play a 3rd game. Fine with me, since 2 games normally go by fast, and 2 people switching off doesn't give much time on a date for a couple to get to know each other, so adding people would give me a chance to get to know him better. Later, I would come to realize that it was the worst decision ever, because the guy ended up being overly competitive, and when one of my sister's friends ended up having dumb luck and being good at bowling that night, he practically left me in the dust as he focused on trying to one-up the friend. That wasn't even the worst part. After we finished bowling, I had to drive him home because he didn't have a car or a license. I sat in silence, simply focusing on the directions he gave to his house while he told me how compatible he thought we were because he needed a woman to keep him in check, and I had the personality to do just that. I had already decided while I was being ignored during bowling that I would never go on another date with him ever again. As a result, I quit going into the game room anytime he was present and made sure that I was around my group of friends so he couldn't talk to me. For months, he kept texting me to set up a second date, but I would always kindly turn him down until finally I thought he stopped. Relieved, I went months without hearing from him, until a random day he sent me another text, flatly asking if I was ever going to go on another date with him. At that point, I kindly said that we weren't compatible and that due to my new work schedule, I didn't have time for dates at that period. Never heard from him since. Oh, and my sister decided to be a sister and did in fact tell my dad about me being on a date the night of bowling. He asked about it the next week and brought up how my sister said I looked like I didn't enjoy it. Told the story to my dad, explained some of the off-putting things after he tried to explain I should give him another chance and not just go bowling, and once he listened to what all my reasons for no more dates were, he said he was on my side. Yeah, I've got to admit, I'm 100% there with you. Just I need a woman who can, keep me in line. Like, oh, no, you want to date someone. You don't want to be in charge of them and their trainer. If you wanted to do that, go and adopt a dog. It'll probably be a much better relationship. Yeah, I mean, guys, if you think that that's a compliment to someone, I guess it kind of is, but I don't think it's it's maybe a compliment to them, but probably doesn't make you look the best. Story 2. I went on a date with a girl I met online. We clicked pretty well online, but in person, she seemed very nervous, and I ended up having to lead the conversation for the most part. No big deal, but I personally prefer equal participation in conversation. Afterward, I wanted to take some time because I honestly wasn't sure how I felt. It had been my first date ever. I had a really bad phone with barely any battery at the time, so I left it home before going out on a run/grocery run. I got home a couple hours later and had the following messages on my phone. A little bit after I had left, I had a really fun time. I hope there's a second date. 30 minutes later. Or is there not going to be a second date? 2 missed calls. Final message 30 minutes after the last one. If you're rejecting me, at least tell me why. Needless to say, I was freaked out and got really stressed about the whole situation. Again, very first date. I called her up and ended things with her as nicely as I could. Edit, just to add, I mainly ended things because I realized I had things to work on for myself because that date made me realize I wasn't ready for the dating world just yet. Although I will add that the stress was increased because before the date she had mentioned showing my picture to her parents. It just felt like things were moving a bit faster than I was prepared for, having no dating experience at that time. It is an anxiety I am trying to work on. Yeah, I know everyone works at different speeds, Some people date a lot faster and harder than others, but showing parents the picture of someone before you've even gone on the first date, I guess that's not terrible. I could see someone being excited and be like, oh, I've got a date tonight. And they're like, who? And it's like, oh, this person from this site. Let me show you a picture of them or something. I don't know, but that's a lot. And then all the texts and stuff. Like, I miss the days before cell phones when I could just go out and people knew they couldn't get a hold of me. Like if they called my house and I didn't answer, oh, he's out. No big deal. Now we got cell phones and you can never, ever be out. How dare you not reply? Ugh, I hate it. Story 3. I'm gay. Met this guy on Tinder. Very nice, educated, polite, nice looking, and the whole 9 yards. Seriously, he checked all the boxes that made me interested and wrote to him in the first place. A level of comfort had been established, so we exchanged numbers. It was like the switch flipped. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I figured you can't really ascribe intent to a text message. The whole read between the lines thing, we eventually met for drinks. Turns out he's a huge pothead. I have nothing against smoking the occasional joint, but when they come in reeking of weed and funky underarms, that's a no-go for me. I decided to be a sport and at least stay for appetizers. Mind you, I wanted this to work. At the very least, I figured I might have a new friend. This guy was argumentative to the point where he turned everything I said into a debate. I'm not expecting everyone to share the same opinions or viewpoints as me, as agreeing to disagree can lead to scintillating conversation. However, this guy, he seemed to be hell-bent on getting the last word and just speaking to hear the sound of his own voice. As someone who has studied psychology, it became clear to me that the guy had severe control issues and was possibly even a narcissist. Fortunately, I didn't live in the area that he did, and I had to drive close to an hour to meet him. I purposely let the texting go quiet just to see if he would reach out and initiate conversation. He didn't. Bullet dodged. Story 4. Not a dude nor a date, but when I was 16, a family friend 3 years older than me introduced me to his old friend from high school. Let's call him Jeffrey. Normally, I would have been okay with getting to meet people this way, except for the fact that he gave Jeffrey all my info. My phone number, my address, all my socials, work profiles, etc. So he started harassing me with texts and calls saying, if we don't go out, I'm going to kill myself, and driving by my house 3 times a day on his truck. At 16, I was scared for my life. After 37 no's, I finally said, if we all hang out at X place together, will you leave me alone? And Jeffrey finally said yes. Horrible idea. We did a group date hangout with 3 other couples, including the family friend who introduced us, at our local mini-golf place. I would have enjoyed this, but the entire time Jeff tried to kiss me, put his arm around me, buddy deodorant is your friend, and hold my hips. I had to push him off me the entire time. The second part of the hangout, we went to the movies at the mall to go see Jack and Jill. Yep, this was 2011. And at last, I could plan my escape. As we sat down, Jeffrey was eating all his food and candy, offering me handfuls covered in saliva and dirt. I went to the bathroom to call my dad to come pick me up at the mall food court. So I texted my family friend to tell him my grandpa was in the hospital. She really was, though, so it wasn't a complete lie. And I had to go see her immediately. After that, I blocked and deleted everyone's numbers, socials, etc., and never spoke to those friends or that awful Jeffrey dude again. Last I checked his Facebook and over time unknowingly befriended an ex-girlfriend of his. He still lives at home, mama still babies him, he mooches money off his older, more successful brother, and he's a registered S offender. Yeesh. Bullet dodged. You did indeed dodge a bullet. And may I also say, I know you did your 37 no's, kept refusing, and then finally said, look, if we just do this with other people around, will you leave me alone? I have in the past once been pestered by someone to go on a date, and I kept saying no, I wasn't interested. And then finally, after many, many attempts, I relented, and that is always a mistake. If you have been saying no to this person that many times, and when you're saying yes, if you're like, I'll just say yes to get him off my back, or maybe it won't be so bad, really think about that. I'm not saying it's definitely a bad idea, but I'm saying you should probably trust your instincts. Oh, by the way, that date, the person that I went out with, gave me a note 2 days later about how she was in love with me and we were going to have kids and stuff. We were in high school. I did not take it well. Story 5. I met someone on a dating app. I knew she was overweight, and she admitted that she was in the process of losing what she had gained during the pandemic. Fair enough, at least she's making an effort. We seemed to click, so we agreed to meet. First red flag was that I walked past her on the street when meeting her. She looked almost nothing like her pictures, employing a certain angle. Looks aren't everything. Weight loss isn't easy, blah, blah, blah. We continue on the date. We're at a movie together, and we help a guy figure out this newfangled assigned seating thing the movies has been doing lately. At first, I thought the guy had a faint, strange scent coming from him. He thanks us and walks away. The smell stays. We go to our seats. The smell lingered. That was the breaking point for me. I get that riding the subway for an hour would probably make me sweat a bit for an hour, but I'd take every measure on a first date to ensure I had no unpleasant odors on me. We got through the movie, it was meh, went for a slice of pizza and played some cards, but she ran out of energy halfway through our second game. When asked what we should do next, I simply said we should probably wrap up as it was late and cold and we each had an hour to get home. We chatted a little bit after, but we eventually stopped chatting. Story 6. I had a date with a girl who was a school teacher friend of a friend. I picked her up at her house, which she shared with her sister. I'm 6'3" and weighed about 190 pounds at the time, and she was 5'1" and her weight was about 200 plus. It didn't bother me that much, as I had dated big girls before. When I closed her door and then mine, I smelled an odor that was not pleasant. It reminded me of some girls' privates that had not been washed in over a month. When we got to the restaurant and ordered, we basically said nothing until our food was served. I tried to make small talk, and she said nothing still. The people at the table next to ours were laughing and appeared to be having a fun time. I even thought about asking them if I could join them, but I didn't want to be that rude. I took her home and said I would call her, and never did. When my friend asked me about the date, I told her that for a teacher, her friend lacked conversational skills and must not know what soap and water was used for. Then she looked at me with her mouth wide open and said the girl told her she had a good time and hoped we would go out again. That didn't happen. Story 7. First date. This was before internet dating. Went to a dating service as I was new in town. Moved for a job. Picked her up and drove 45 minutes to a casino. Used the time to try to get to know each other. I got there and had dinner. Afterwards, I wanted to gamble some. $20 was my limit. She said, I didn't bring any money. A lie. I gave her $20 and said if you lose it, no problem, but if you win, I get half. She agreed. I lost my money, but she won $600. I said, great, where's my $300? She said, I didn't think you were serious. She refused to give me what she promised. On the way home, I proceeded to tell her how awful she was. Should have left her there, but I'm not A.H. We get to her place, live with her parents still, give me $300, and tell me to go tell. Called the dating agency the next day to cancel their service, and they told me that they called the police. Turns out she said I kidnapped her and wouldn't let her leave unless she gave me $300. Talked to the police as she did. She then confessed the truth. Worst date ever. At least I got $300. Yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that she did not think you were just joking about giving that money back, but she kind of did a little pro and con list in her head, which do I care more about at this point? $600 or dating this guy? $600 or dating this guy? And she decided to gamble again and try and keep the $600, and it did not work out well for her. So I'm sorry that Doesn't sound like a great date, though I will also say I don't know that I'd ever want someone to take me to a casino for a date, but I'm not a fan of casinos, mostly because I'm very bad at gambling. Story 8. I met a man for dinner at a local restaurant. We chatted while waiting and had common interests. When the meal arrived, he stuck his fork in my food and took a huge bite after he tried his. I asked why he did that, and he said, "I'm paying, so it's mine." With that, I got up to go to the restroom to organize my thoughts. When I stood up, he grabbed my butt cheek and squeezed really hard. I am tiny, and he was not, so his hand span touched all the wrong places. I spun around and slapped his face. He rubbed his cheek and said, "I like bees with fire." The waitress followed me into the restroom and asked if I needed a cab. I said I had my car. She took me through the kitchen to the back door, gave me another serving of what I ordered, and let me know it's on the butt. He called for weeks despite me telling him not to call. In another, I had been visiting with a guy online and agreed to have dinner with him. When he opened his wallet to pay, I saw his license was 10 years older than he told me. If he will lie about that, he will lie about anything. Nope. Story 9. Could honestly get this one off my chest. I had a date with a girl who I met online. We decided to meet up for dinner at a small restaurant. She was a huge Christian believer. No worries, I'd dated a previous Christian believer before. The part that concerned me was her huge obsession to Michael Jackson, and I mean a huge obsession, like she would do his own corpse if given the chance, she said. She apparently wanted me to dress and act as the late singer whenever we're going out or doing it for future meets. Basically, she was asking to change my entire life and personality into someone else. Major red flags at this point. We paid for dinner, we had split bills, then I said goodbye to her and never went on the second date as I had deleted my social media profile on the site I met her. Story 10. I went out with this girl from a dating app. She wasn't the same as from her profile photos, but I still continued with the date. We went to this really cool bar and ordered cocktails. 15 minutes into the date, I said jokingly, "So this is where you normally bring your dates?" She took it so seriously that she started to tell me how rude I was for asking her that and that she didn't expect me to be that kind of man. I had no idea she was going to take that so personal. After the date, she kept texting and I just never replied back. Story 11. First date with a young woman. Things seemed to be going well. I think I talked about rebuilding my house after a fire and she mentioned her father was in construction. Then she made the comment that her mother married beneath her station. That was more than enough for me. I was absolutely flabbergasted. Anyone who believes that economic station matters more than love is just not the girl for me. Story 12. Not a dude, but I will proudly tell my story of being the reason. I rode my bike to our first date, came out of the coffee shop to a flat tire, and I spent the rest of our date attempting to fix the tire. Attempting to make small talk, I asked him, "So, what's been your worst date so far?" He just looked at me funny. We eventually shoved my bike into his tiny hatchback car, and needless to say, there was no second date. I'm happily married now. Well, I am glad that you are happily married now because you sound delightful. Coffee shop and taking your bike there. Those are two big thumbs up from me, so I would have thought you're pretty cool, I bet. And this person sounds like a real stick in the mud. Like, God, it's a first date, you know? It's like, chill out a little bit. Have some fun. Go with the flow, guy. Yeah, sucks to him. Good for you. Story 13. I met a woman in a bar. She lived in the same town. We made a date and she called and canceled half an hour before I was going to pick her up. I was peed, wasted a Saturday night. Stayed home with my dog. She called me and wanted to go out next weekend. I decided to give her a taste of her medicine. We were supposed to meet at a restaurant, so I called her house half an hour before the date to cancel. Her mom answered the phone and said she was in the shower, so I told her mom that I was canceling our date and asked her to tell her daughter. Mom screamed into the phone, "What? She's getting married in 1 month." Karma is a bee. Story 14. My story is a bit silly. I brought her flowers and she ate them. And then I suggested going for milkshakes at a nearby 60s-themed restaurant and then go stargazing. I knew she liked space and stuff like that. And then she said she didn't want to go out in public with me, and I was kind of offended and just didn't feel like taking another shot. Haven't spoken since. Story 15. I refused a second date to a guy who kept insisting on showing me his penile implant on our first date. First date! Also, he said he was 5'8" and was shorter than me. I get that many women won't date short guys, but being 5'2" myself, that had never happened. It's not something you can hide in person, unlike the implant, which you should hide. Okay, we're gonna get to the implant in a second here. But first off, guys, don't lie about your height. Just don't. I am just under 5'11". I used to be 5'11 and a half, and genuinely, I'm getting older and I'm shrinking. I'm like 5'10 and a half now. It's terrible. And it's fine. And if you're shorter than that, that's fine. Just be honest. People will figure out if you lie. It's not hard. We have eyes. And second, what? He's showing you his implant? Like, no judgment if he wants to get one. Fine. People, alter your bodies. They're yours. You get to make those decisions. But don't show it off on a first date. That's a bit much. Story 16. The date I didn't know was a date. We were friends and she wanted to hang out. She was friends with my last ex-fiancé who left me at that time 6 months ago. Went to the bar, everyone hung out, got something to eat, talked to friends, and went home. She had her car at my place. She said she didn't want to go home, so I shrugged and turned on the TV and took the dog out. Absolutely nothing romantic about any of this. She jumps into the hot tub, I shrug, take the dog inside. She takes a shower as I am falling asleep on the couch, awakened by her suddenly kissing me, then biting my lips. Not a love bite, she was going full zombie on my face. Apparently she does this all the time and thought it turned guys on. Had to throw her off me. Eventually it gets into her head and she leaves. Haven't seen or heard from her in years. Story 17. I have two. The first happened when I was in high school. The girl was incredibly bossy and nothing was in her liking. I said nope and she went nuts and tried to slap me. Second story, we agreed to meet after work, but she came about 1 hour late. She made a really bad excuse about that. Red flags after that. Another woman hit her lightly by chance with a purse and she made a scene. She decided to find something in her gargantuan bag just in front of a theater at the exact moment when people are leaving, so she was just wandering there and I politely tried to tell her the situation, but she was relentless. She talked like a parrot without any pause, and she was absolutely boring. She was a pest. I never phoned back and blocked her number. Story 18. I have always dated people I knew as friends, until a couple years ago when I decided to try a dating app. Went on my first official date with a guy who, after drinking water, would proceed to lick the glass with the underside of his tongue. He kept doing it every single time. It was disgusting and very confusing. When the food he was eating started sticking to the glass after licking, I was officially done. He walked me out of the bar and I said, "It was nice meeting you," immediately turned and left. What? I'm sorry, what? Okay. Licked the glass with the underside of his tongue every time he took a drink. I'm having trouble visualizing this. 1 sec. Gonna grab my coffee mug here. Let the camera focus. Good grief. You might have to cut that, editor. So take a drink and then... I hate it! No, get out of there. Oh, my God. What was that? No. Story 19. So I asked this girl out and she said yes. I went to pick her up, and when she answered the door, a group of girls were in the living room laughing. She told me that she had changed her mind and closed the door on me amid gales of laughter from her friends inside. I bumped into her again about 10 years later at Wally World, Walmart. She was so glad to see me and immediately said we should get together and do something. She had put on about 50 or 60 pounds, cut off all her long hair, and had 2 children in tow. I politely declined. Story 20. Talking for a long time online, we agreed to meet for dinner in person. I asked if I should pick her up, and she declined and said she would get a ride from one of her friends to the restaurant. I thought that was okay, first time meeting in person, and you don't want to be in a car with someone you've only talked to online. I understand, but she was 30 minutes late when her ride dropped her off. They had a really deep kiss, and she acted like nothing happened. I asked who her ride was, and she said, "It's just my idiot ex-boyfriend. We're not serious anymore, but want to remain friends." She talked about how much she didn't like him 80% of the night, despite swapping spit with him when he dropped her off. No second date, and blocked on all social media, I did. Story 21. A long time ago, I took this girl out to some kind of circus thing. She knew in advance that's where we were going. And once we got there, she seemed rather distracted and bored, so I asked her what was wrong. She confessed that there was this one social event that was going on in our circle, and she would have gone there except no one going there had asked her. I didn't have an invitation myself, so obviously couldn't take her, so I asked if I should just take her home. She said yes, and so I did just that. Story 22. Met her, she looked nothing like her photos on her profile. I don't mind that so much, I get it, everyone wants to look their best before they meet somebody. But the breaking point? Me, as a massive animal lover, was quite interested in her job as a vet assistant. She spent the entire time telling me over and over about the animals she had to put down and how she wanted to take the bodies to taxidermy. She admitted she kept one and has it in her lounge. I noped the F out. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't just leave that date. I'm pretty sure I would try and, warn the vet that this person works for, hey, by the way, this person wants to steal animal bodies and taxidermy them. Please get rid of them. I'm never going to take my pets to you ever again. I don't think there's anything wrong with taxidermy and stuff. I'm not personally a fan, but for that, with the job, no. Oh, that leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Or maybe it's from licking my cup with the underside of my tongue. Story 23. The only thing more uncomfortable than a date who won't stop complaining about their ex is a date who won't stop talking about how attractive or wonderful their ex is. I assume you find your ex attractive, or at least did at one point, or why would you have been with them? But that's a whole separate thing from getting to know a new person, and I don't need to hear it. Story 24. I met with a woman who tells me about an ex of hers who got her a car and was making the payments until they broke up. Then he stopped making the payments like a normal person would. She was upset that he didn't finish paying for the car because it was her gift from him. Personally, that alone was enough of a red flag to stay far away, and there were plenty more. Story 25. Literally had a date that was on her phone the entire time texting. She was only half listening and barely paid any attention. I told her I had to go to the bathroom. I paid my half and dipped too. 45 minutes later, she texted me and said, "Did you leave?" To which I replied, "Wow, it took you 45 minutes to notice?" Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.